Hi everybody, I'm Hubsmash, and welcome to the graphics optimization and performance guide for Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain. This is mostly targeted at NVIDIA cards because I'm not too familiar with the GPUs available by AMD. I want to preface this by saying that although this is based on testing, it's still somewhat based on personal opinion. A good example is that some people hate depth of field and would say that if depth of field is off, it improves visual quality. Just keep that in mind while watching. So the recommended specs for this game are Core i7-4790. That's not the K edition, or better. Memory is 8 gigs of RAM or above. Graphics, GeForce GTX 760 or above. I'm running this on an i7-4790K at stock with Turbo Boost disabled. I got 8 gigs of DDR3, 1600 MHz RAM, an ASUS Strix GTX 970 4 gig VRAM, overclocked 1353 MHz core and 7010 MHz on the memory. The CPU load when I'm running the game is about 25%. GPU load's about 60 to 75%. Temperatures are good. They're well within the normal ranges, 60 degrees Celsius or so. So let's just get into the settings. So I want to go through each setting, and I'll just explain a little bit about what it does, what kind of performance impact you can get by turning them off or setting them a certain way. Depth of field. On PC, they actually used a different methodology for the implementation of depth of field. It looks a lot nicer, in my opinion, than on the console editions, but you can gain another 5 to 10% if you disable this. Although I find it does look a lot worse, so I would try to keep this on if you can. Model detail basically affects the model pop-in distance and the level of detail on models. So the higher it is, the further away you'll be able to see things at a higher detail. The performance impact on it's pretty low, but you'll notice a pretty big change in the way that things look. At least I found, if you put it on lower settings, and the performance impact is pretty low as well. So I would try to keep this on extra high or high if you can. For textures, a 2 gig VRAM card should be perfectly capable of extra high textures without any issue. It does use a little bit more VRAM, but it will pull out and pull in RAM as it needs to, and you should be okay. I have a trusted friend who let me know that his tests were all good and he's running a 2 gig 760, and I'm running a 4 gig card, so I wasn't able to test how this would do on a 2 gig card, but he says it does well. There's no actual FPS impact, but what you might find if you don't have enough RAM to cover the textures is you'll find pop-in or stutter as the game loads all the textures into memory. So try to keep this on extra high. So for texture filtering, it's a negligible cost and fairly difficult actually to distinguish a difference between any of the settings, in my opinion. I don't know what the situations are where you would notice the difference, and I didn't notice any real performance hit. I would just keep it on extra high. Shadows are a lot crisper on extra high versus low. Low is like a soft shadow, which some people actually kind of prefer. There is a bit of a performance impact on these, but it's fairly minimal. I would try to keep it on extra high if you can, because it's fairly free as far as performance goes. For lighting, this essentially is the detail and distance on the lighting. So extra high offers huge distance on the lighting, and you can look at screenshots and compare the PC version versus the console versions, and you can really see the difference between extra high and the console's version of lighting. You could see lights for miles with extra high, and it looks really nice. So I would do extra high. There's a minimal performance increase by lowering this, so I would try to keep it on extra high. Post-processing has probably the most significant impact on performance. I'd recommend trying to leave it on extra high because it does look great, but high is the lowest setting available to enable post-process anti-aliasing, and therefore looks a lot better than low. So low does offer a pretty huge, maybe 10 to 15% increase over high, and perhaps a 20% increase over very high or extra high. So, I mean, it's up to you, but off doesn't offer much of an increase over low. So really, the lowest you want to go on this one is low, but definitely try to stay on extra high or high if you can, because it just looks great. Just kind of test and see if your rig can handle it. And that same kind of thing goes for effects. So these two are the biggest performance impacts in the game. The last three, really. Actually, the last four. But effects are basically the things that are happening in the game when you get into fights and start using like your abilities and things like that, or not your abilities, but your gadgets and stuff like that. And the more people start firing on you, maybe helicopters come in and start shooting rockets or something like that. Explosions, clouds, smoke clouds, that kind of thing. You might find your rig start to struggle in those situations. And if that's the case, you can start to lower this down. I definitely recommend extra high over any of the other settings. But again, it does have a significant performance increase if you lower this. Ambient Occlusion. This is essentially the shadowing effect that goes around objects as they kind of meld into other backgrounds. So you can kind of distinguish them a little bit better, and it increases the graphical fidelity of the image. So I definitely want to keep this on high at least, or extra high. There is a fairly significant 5 to 10% performance increase. So if you lower this to high, to low or off. If you turn this off, approximately 10%. Volumetric clouds, these look cool. They're fairly unnecessary, but they look nice. They are basically dynamically generated clouds that have shadowing effects. So as they float around over top of you, if there's a light source above them, they'll cast dynamic shadows on the ground, and they look nice. But again, they kind of take a pretty big performance impact. So 5 to 10% maybe. And so enable them if you can, but if not, they're an addition that is not 100% necessary in my opinion. I hope you guys are enjoying Metal Gear Solid 5, The Phantom Pain, as much as I am. If you enjoyed this video, I'd appreciate it if you click the like button. If you want to see more of The Phantom Pain, definitely subscribe. I'll be putting out a Let's Play series and other tips and tricks and things like that. And I'd really appreciate the support. Thanks again. Take care.